Welcome back to the Blame Game. I'm Maria Armstrong from Packside Academy, and I'm joined again by Nathan Hutchison. Nathan, do you want to introduce yourself to the folks?
Yeah, sure. So I work with Academy, focused on projects, service delivery, leadership development, some change management as well. So Maria and I, as we mentioned in the last one, have been having a lot of fun discussions around the blame that gets apportioned between sales and projects, and from projects to service, which is another thing I'll unpack at another point. But lots of interesting things to talk about, lots of different perspectives that we want to cover off and talk through.
So in our last session, we were chatting about underselling and how it's a big problem. And some of the issues it causes once the project or the service gets to the teams delivering them. And so a question that's come up from that session is, why do teams undersell? Why do salespeople undersell? And there's a whole host of reasons. And we thought we'd unpack some of those today. We'll have a chat about what goes into decision making for sales people as part of this. Do you have anything to add to that, Nathan?
No, I'm curious to know as well, having been on the receiving end, as we've talked about before. I suppose one of the things that I often wonder is there a lack of strategy over the top with some of the selling as well around, who are we selling to? What type of businesses? Are we aligning it with our technology stack and our solutions? Do we have clarity on what types of businesses we need to work with? As well as, what is a acceptable margin that we're trying to work towards across these projects, as opposed to purely just focusing on bringing revenue in. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So a typical compensation plan for a sales rep probably often will break down different areas that the business wants you to sell into, or different lines of business product. It's not necessarily going to talk about the ideal customer. I do wonder whether businesses know their ideal customer. Have you done a customer profile? Do you know who you want to sell to? Have you figured out the ones that make you money and the ones who don't? Because if you're selling into businesses that are your ideal customer, you'll make more money from them because you're positioning everything you do around delivering to the ideal customer. When time's tight, or when you're starting up, or when the maturity of the business hasn't got to the point where you can sit back and say what works and what doesn't work from a working with our customers perspective, it's just fire hose it. We're going to sell to anybody who will say yes. And that's where we get in trouble sometimes when we're delivering services to clients that aren't aligned with the business and the way we want to run the business. And that takes time. It takes an investment from the business perspective into looking into each of those clients, who's making money, what products are making us money, what products are our service teams happy to support, and what and the approach, and what projects, and all of those sorts of things. So it is that holistic view of the company. And then once you know that as a business owner, that needs to be broken down into how you want your sales reps to sell and who you want them to sell to, because sales reps will sell to their compensation plan. So if you say, I'm going to pay you big dollars for every managed service, and then you get not much for internet connections, I'm just picking two random products off the top of my head, where do you think the sales reps are going to sell?
Sure.
So if you haven't thought about what you want them to sell, so if you do it the other way around, you're a managed service provider, but you know what? You make more money, you make good margin on internet connections, on phone systems, And so the compensation that you've got in the plan for the sales rep is pretty good for those products. But for managed services, we all know the margins can be a bit tight. There's a bit less money maybe to play with there. So the compensation for the sales rep's a lot smaller for those. Bang for buck, what's the sales rep going to focus on? They're going to focus on the thing that pays them better money, because it's often an easier and a quicker sales cycle as well.
Sure. So these all sound like symptoms a little bit, what we were talking about last week with targets and things like that. So is there things that owners, managing directors, people that are setting these targets should really actually be looking at in ways to incentivize the right types of selling? So, if your primary business model is managed services, but you're rewarding people more for selling internet connections, there's a lack of alignment there, and it ties into my question before around, is there a strategy that's, overarching that people can align to and follow? Do you see that being the case? And if so, what can be done?
That comes down to knowing what you want out of your business. I mean, that's part of that business planning. If you look at that, you know your finance. You look at your finances. You work out what your focus in your business is, and that's not to say we're not selling the internet connection that's making money. It's just to say that we need to figure out how to focus the sales team and how to focus. So build it around the targets, obviously. I've seen some great plans and some great approaches to educating the sales team. So sit down and explain to them the core business, make sure the sales, the people who are talking to the customers day in, day out, and very often it is the business owner, but sometimes if you're hiring a salesperson for the first time, or you've got a sales team, and then they're not aligned, that's where your problem's going to be. If they don't know that the key business focus is managed services or managed security services, they're not going to focus on that, because as far as they're concerned, whatever you're featuring, whatever you're focusing on from a compensation plan, that must be the business number one focus. So I worked in a company once where we were selling software, we were selling consulting services, and we were selling hardware.
Okay.
And we were sat down and told verbally, the number one focus for us from a sales perspective was consulting services, because that's where we made the money.
Okay.
We sold software, and then the consulting services to basically customize the software, and then we sold hardware to support it. But the hardware was not relevant. Now, they built our compensation plan. In some parts, it was great. So the hardware component, because it wasn't as important, I think we had to make up 5% of our number was on hardware. And it used to just kind of tick along and happen. We didn't really have to worry about it. It wasn't something we thought about. The consulting side of things was a really hard sale, because it involved numerous people to come in. We had to write proposals, and it was a long and difficult sales slog. The software, it was quite a bespoke piece of software, and it needed that consulting service to work. You couldn't run it without customization. The problem was that about 70% of our target was based on the license sale. So we had 70% on license sales, 25% on consulting services, and 5% on hardware. That needed to shift, because sales reps would go in selling licenses and then be like, oh yeah, by the way, there's this consulting piece that you kind of need. And the customers spend a whole lot of money on agreed to the concept of the licensing, and hasn't realized that they then have to go and spend a ton of money on consulting services. And that's where that project creep that we talked about last time can come in.
Yeah.
You go back to the customer. Yeah, go back to the customer and go, you just spent like $400,000 with us on this software agreement. Now we need you to spend $500,000 on the consulting to actually make it work.
Yeah.
it doesn't leave for a happy customer.
No. So from what you were saying before, you create, incentives around the selling the license and selling the professional services, and you Trojan horse it in at the end, and they have to pay for it. And you're not really off to a great, relationship there for once it's gone from projects to service. There's already this lack of trust that's coming through because you've slipped it under the rug. How effective do you think it is to tell someone that your primary focus is on this thing, but we're going to judge you, assess your performance, incentivize you to do a lot better in a different area where you're going to make a lot more money? How successful do you think having that conversation in reality is for a salesperson of, yeah, we want you to sell licenses, or let's move away from licenses for a sec and go back to what we were talking about before, internet connections and managed services. We want you to sell more managed services because it's our primary business model. You're going to get paid way less. There's less incentive for you to do it. Our primary business model is managed services. What can we do around that?
So the number one thing with incentivization is make sure you're incentivizing the sales team to on the primary focus for your business. So the thing that is the most important to your business. Now, are you incentivizing, and we can't tell people what the most important thing to their business is.
No.
Is the most important thing retaining clients and making sure they're happy? Is the most important thing getting net new clients on a managed service plan or on a different kind of plan? Are you doing the good, better, best thing? And do you want everybody on the best plan? Those things are something that the owner of the business needs to make a decision on. What's the number one most important thing, and figure out how you're going to incentivize around that. It's that simple. It's difficult to write a compensation plan, of course, if you're talking financially, but that's where you need to have the focus if that's what you want your sales team to be doing. It makes salespeople sound callous and horrible and completely financially driven. And that's not what I'm trying to do, but it is. But it's the way it works.
Okay, so if you're seeing these types of behaviors, you should be looking at what you're measuring and incentivizing people on, right?
Yep, absolutely, without question. You need to measure all sorts of areas of the business. Not just the what makes money, the financial component. Measure everything. Ask your service team what kind of clients they like to support. Ask your service team which of the service managed plans work best. If you're selling a good, better, best, is that actually working financially and from your service delivery team? Get the vibe from all members of your team, and then figure out what's important and incentivize accordingly.
Yeah. I suppose you could start using that towards building a picture of what your ideal client is as well, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, because you got the information now. You've got some clients already. You've seen what works, what doesn't. No, I think that's a good starting point, because I could see with the measures and how we're typically doing it, we're incentivizing the wrong behaviors, and I was talking about the Trojan horse. We're doing it. If we are doing good money on internet lines, and if I'm thinking about it from my perspective of the salesperson, from my compensation, I've got rent to pay, or I've got a house and a mortgage, or I've got a family, everything's getting more expensive. I might chuck in a whole bunch of internet connections and then undersell managed services because the margin's smaller. I'm going to get paid a smaller commission. Why not just undersell, undervalue it? If you can a small percent of a small amount of dollars, doesn't really matter. You can rack it up, and I think that can cause some of the problems we were talking about yesterday, where you undersell things because you're bundling it with other stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And quick win or a quick sales cycle for some of the things that might not be as important for your business. So yeah, well, I think we've still got a fair way to go to figure out some of these solutions. So the number one step is going to be for people to have a think about what's important in their business, from what kind of clients they want and what they want to sell to them. And then I think from an underselling perspective, next time we might talk about the not understanding the projects and the client's needs, because I think that might be the next big topic that we need to try and see if we can unpack.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Okay. Thank you, Nathan.
Cool. Thanks.